Western Marxism, section, East and West, from Christianity to Marxism. Born in the heart of the West, with the October Revolution, Marxism spread to every corner of the world, penetrating forcefully into countries and areas in backward economic and social conditions, and with very different cultures. Having behind it the Judeo-Christian tradition, Western Marxism echoed, not a few times as we have seen, with messianic motivations, the expectation of a communism conceived and believed to be the end of every conflict and contradiction, and so a kind of end to history. This messianism is largely absent in a culture like the Chinese, mostly characterized in the last millennium by the attention given to mundane social reality. The planetary expansion of Marxism was the start of a bifurcation process, which was the other side of a clamorous victory. It also historically happened to the great religions. As far as Christianity is concerned, it is not by chance that Engels repeatedly compared it to the socialist movement. The division between Orthodox on the one side and Protestants and Catholics on the other corresponds to the division between East and West. At a certain point, between the end of the 17th and the beginning of the 18th century, it seems that Christianity was also about to spread en masse into the Asian East. Jesuit missionaries exercised a notable influence in China and enjoyed great prestige, having brought advanced medical and scientific knowledge. At the same time, they adapted themselves to the country that hosted them, paying homage to Confucius and the cult of ancestors. But, with the intervention of the Pope in defense of the purity of the Christian religion, the Chinese emperor reacted by barring the doors of the Middle Kingdom to the missionaries. Christianity was treated favorably when it complied with sinification and promoted the scientific, social, and human development of the country where it was allowed to operate. It was rejected as a foreign body when it was seen to be a religion of otherworldly salvation that in no way respected the culture and human and social relations in force in the country it operated in. Something similar happened to Marxism. With Mao, the Chinese Communist Party promoted the sinification of Marxism, gaining momentum from the struggle for liberation from colonial domination, for the development of the productive forces to make possible economic and technological independence as well, and for making young again a nation with a 1,000-year-old civilization that had undergone colonialism and imperialism in the century of humiliation that began with the Opium Wars. Far from being rejected by the leaders of the People's Republic of China, they proudly proclaimed the socialist and communist perspective. However, it was stripped of messianism. Secondly, its realization was delegated to a very long historical process in which social emancipation could not be disengaged from national emancipation. And again, it was the West that was the custodian of the orthodox doctrine, and it is again from Western Marxism that the disavowal would come. This time, the disavowal hits Eastern Marxism, which appears hardly credible and, in any case, banal from the point of view of a Marxism charmed by the beauty of a remote and utopian future, whose advent seems to be independent of material conditions, such as the geopolitical situation or the development of the productive forces, being instead exclusively determined and prioritized entirely by revolutionary political will. This disenchantment, this bifurcation, the schism of which we speak, does not take aim only at China. Western Marxism followed with participatory and impassioned attention, while Vietnam was fighting an epic resistance in a colonial war that first saw France, then the United States, as antagonists. But today, Vietnam is buried in oblivion while engaged in the prosaic task of economic development. Cuba no longer attracts the enthusiasm it did when it faced Washington's military aggression, unsuccessful, in 1961 and for a long time afterward. Now that the danger of military intervention is remote, the communist leaders of Cuba aim to reinforce their economic independence. To accomplish this, they feel obligated to make some concessions to the market and private property, cautiously inspired by the Chinese model. So the island that no longer seems to be a utopia on the way to realization, but reveals itself to be in the grip of its own difficulties in constructing a post-capitalist society, becomes less fascinating to Western Marxists. When it was still in its first stage, the military struggle for political independence, the anti-colonial revolution seldom gained from Western Marxism the sympathetic attention and theoretical interest it deserved. Now that the anti-colonial revolution is in its second stage, the struggle for economic and technological independence, Western Marxism reacts with disinterest, disdain, and hostility. Western Marxism's incapacity to consider the turning point within the turning point in the 20th century provoked the schism between the two Marxisms. While the clouds of a new Great War thicken, this schism is revealed to be more ominous than ever. It is time to put an end to it. Naturally, this will not make the cultural, social, and political differences between the East and West disappear, nor the tasks that must be accomplished. In the West, the socialist prospect passes through a struggle against a capitalism synonymous with worsening social polarization and rising militarist temptations. However, we do not see why these differences should transform into antagonisms. Indeed, the excommunication inflicted by Western Marxism on Eastern Marxism has resulted not in the end of the excommunicated party, but of the excommunicator. Overcoming doctrinaire attitudes, the willingness to measure oneself against one's own time, and philosophizing rather than prophesying are the necessary preconditions for Marxism's rebirth and development in the West. End section.